While most things crawl on the ground, others become kings. 55 years ago, the Air Force had something important to think about. Military aircraft were normally enough for the wars of that time, but at the end of the Vietnam War, these aircraft were no longer enough because the bar of military aircraft had been raised one click higher and they were too powerful. The C-141 Starlifter was fast, but could not land on short runways. The C-130 Hercules was very strange. Nothing happens to this aircraft, but there are very few of them. The main plan was, at that time, the runways were very few, and they wanted to develop an aircraft to land on dirt places. A powerful aircraft was planned to carry very heavy loads to go in a bidet single. This requirement led to the creation of the Advanced Medium STOL Transport AMST program, which produced a prototype that is mostly forgotten in aviation history, but to which we owe a lot. Douglas McDonnell YC-15. This aircraft will be people's favorite aircraft in 50 or 70 years because it is aimed at an aircraft that will save people, a star airplane. The primary goal of the airplane was simple: to carry a lot of cargo, then to offer the possibility of taking off from small places, and also to fly very long are among the main goals, and most importantly, to land very well on dirt roads. No one will complain about these landings. This may seem simple, but achieving this balance with 1970s technology required an engineering miracle. McDonnell Douglas put all its expertise and courage into this prototype. At first glance, the YC-15 looked like a conventional transport aircraft, but its innovative aerodynamics set it apart. The most striking feature of the aircraft was the four Pratt & Whitney JT8D-17 turbofan engines, which were placed under the wing and had specially curved pylons. The most remarkable feature of the aircraft is that this system has an engine support feature such as hill takeoff support in cars, thanks to which the engine can take off comfortably without difficulty, and it does this as follows. Four Pratt & Whitney JT8D-17 turbofan engines positioned under the wing, but with specially inclined pylons. The YC-15, with its unique double-groove wing flaps and flaperon system that allows it to land on short runways up to 600 meters, is intended to give you some lift even at low speed, so there is no damage to the engine and no maintenance cost to you. These engines produced 44,000 pounds of power, which provided extremely smooth flight characteristics. However, it's not technically very important in and of itself. In addition, this project was in direct competition with Boeing's YC-14 prototype. Boeing's approach was more rigid, Coanda method, the aim of which was to create lift, and to do this by reintroducing lift by placing the engines on top of the wings rather than underneath them. Tests of both airplanes were successful. The Air Force closely followed these two different strategies, each with its own benefits. However, by 1980, the AMST program was facing budget cuts. The YC-14 and YC-15 were never put into production. This did not mean that we were embarking on a new project, but that there would be more to come, because McDonnell Douglas would use all the expertise gained from this project in the following years in the much larger C-17 Globemaster III project. 44 years ago, the plug was pulled on this program. Due to the Pentagon's emphasis on short runway performance, this aircraft did not attract much attention during this period, so it was shelved in the dust. However, there were other valid reasons for this. The bigger strategic picture that the U.S. Department of Defense had in mind was that a fast, heavy, and adaptable airlift capability was essential to the ongoing Cold War with the Soviet Union. To compete with the Soviets as the main target, a lot of aircraft had to be built to carry very heavy military vehicles, and a long-range, fuel-efficient aircraft was needed, not short-range aeroplanes. The intercepted YC-15 high-end aircraft came to the fore this time. The project was never abandoned by McDonnell Douglas. Every concept that the YC-15 had previously proved in wind tunnels, in the mid-1980s, the USAF-CX was put back in the public eye, but this time for use as a transport. The DNA of the YC-15 led to aerodynamic solutions, wing structure, landing gear, loading ramp, tail design, etc. All this required a highly technical brain, and they would soon find it. The new aircraft had to fly on a 1,000-meter runway and carry a payload of 70 tons. It would have to operate over short distances as well as over 4,000 nautical miles. It would have a larger structure like an Ironman. The C-17 Globemaster III made its air debut 34 years ago. The C-17's engines were more powerful, its fuselage wider, and its nose sharper. However, the remnants of its ancestors were visible to the naked eye. The YC-15 was mounted on this aircraft, which means it was a theft. That's how they did it. Underwing arrangement, high lift systems, flaperon structure, 4 engines. Although the vast majority of McDonnell Douglas engineers switched from the YC-15 to the C-17, no one understood, or those who understood did not speak in order not to stain this new aircraft. This shows that the C-17 failed in the first place. The C-17 eventually emerged emerged as a mainstay of the U.S. Air Force. It has taken part in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the earthquake in Haiti, the COVID-19 pandemic, and countless military, humanitarian, evacuation, and civilian operations around the world. Indeed, 4 years ago, when the U.S. withdrew completely from Afghanistan, people with such a low level of education were clinging to the wheels of the airplane. In addition, they all unintentionally bore the imprint of a prototype that had previously been considered a failure. Although it never went into production, the concepts of the YC-15 were revolutionary. Even though the C-17 is a marvel of engineering, it has to thank someone, the YC-15, because most of the parts are stolen from it. However, the whole narrative is based on a technological revolution as well as a political and industrial revolution. What impact did the Boeing McDonnell Douglas merger have on the future of the program? When the C-17 was in production, danger was always lurking, no one knows for sure. And how did the seemingly dead fuselage of the YC-15 dominate the skies for 2 decades? The Cold War ended in the early 1990s. The USSR had disintegrated, and so there were fewer wars. Nobody wanted to deal with these devices. So US defense budgets began to decline in this new era. That's why the war projects were scaled down a lot. There was talk of rebuilding this aircraft, and that was jeopardized. Everyone was very hopeful about this aircraft, but no one liked the first aircraft built. It was also a very costly aircraft. It was very expensive, so no one could buy it. And those who did bought their planes very late. In short, the aircraft exploded in the hands of America. The U.S. Congress was harshly criticized. There was a serious discussion by the Ministry of Defense about the possibility of terminating the program. And McDonnell Douglas was preparing to go to the dusty shelves. But this time, things were different. What would take you forward this time was a vision, and it was necessary to create it. The C-17 was unique in terms of engineering, but also in terms of politics and strategy. The aircraft could land at small airfields and carry heavy loads. This aircraft could carry anything you could think of. It was also distinguished by its sophisticated propulsion reversibility, automatic flight systems, and short-range stall capability. Because of these features, the question of whether the C-17 could be a presidential aircraft came to mind. And this question was asked to everyone. The Pentagon was aware of this. USAF received the first production models in 1993. In the early days, the question of producing 210 came to people's minds. But what erased this question in their minds was its performance. This performance was a performance that no other aircraft had. It served in dust storms in Africa, traveled to other countries as a hospital and returned, and landed like a flying carpet in places without runways in Iran and Iraq. The spirit of the YC-15, once almost canceled, was preserved more and more with each flight. Boeing and McDonnell Douglas came together 28 years ago and decided that we should become a team. For the C-17 program, this merger was both a risk and a savior. Boeing took this company from the edge of the cliff and then improved it a lot. Quality has improved. The issues that these buyers were complaining about have been resolved. You can rewind to find out, and cost has gone down. Since then, the C-17 has become a popular platform around the world, valued by both the U.S. Air Force and its allies. The countries that have purchased this aircraft are UK, Australia, Canada, India, Qatar, and many more. This enormous platform, harboring the genes of an airplane that was never built, was taken from the trough to the top thanks to Boeing. Perhaps the story of the YC-15 is a footnote that is passed over in a few sentences. However, those who analyze aviation history more closely will see that this is a turning point. It is not the name of a failed race, but the name of a seed planted for the future. And every time the C-17 takes off, it proves that this seed has sprouted. The next chapter will examine the technical aspects of the YC-15 in more detail, explain why it was favored over its rival Boeing YC-14, and show that even if it did not win, it meant that it was declared the #1 and king of the AMST race. Dozens of C-17s got out of there with a flash of speed in everything that was difficult in every field. The only problem is that the shelved YC-15 has parts on this aircraft in its entirety. We have the right to say, it's like this aircraft just changed the name. This silent pioneer is still recognized for creating one of the most important milestones in aviation history. It lives on test tracks, engineer drawings, and ammunition-laden mission plans, rather than in eye-catching headlines. Although it seems to be forgotten in the dusty pages of history, this aircraft should come to mind in every challenging mission. We should feel sorry for the YC-15 because it could not do or be made to do anything that this aircraft did, and no one talks about this aircraft. However, this does not mean that it was not successful. Often, the first forward jump can be more successful than the one before you. What are your thoughts? What would the YC-15 have done in this aircraft's place? What other silent pioneers in aviation history have paved the way for real revolutions. Leave a comment and let's talk about it.